you very much. Thank you, Dean Terrell, for that gracious. I guess it wasn't an introduction since so many people here know me, but yeah, it's really great to be home. I was sharing stories about my experiences in what was once called the pit. Some of you were around for that, and this doesn't look like the pit to me at all, really. But listen, here, let's do a game plan about what we're going to do tonight. And we'll just sort of see how it unfolds. I also know that it's a Thursday night. It's 7:03 according to Mickey's little hands. I'm going to get you out of here in a reasonable amount of time. 4 hours should take care of it. There's nothing more dismal, I think, than listening to some soul read his book. You can read, right? I mean, what I'll do instead is talk a little bit, read little snippets out of it, just so you get a sense of what the book is like, and it will help me also expand at least some of the themes that are in that book tonight. And here's the other thing that's unusual maybe about these kinds of events. I actually like to be interrupted, not with tomatoes or something like that, but tossed. But what I do like is if you have a question, a burning issue, let's do it. Okay, let's talk together. That seems to me to be a better learning process than my droning on and then you wait until the end and in politeness ask a question that you didn't really mean to ask anyway. So let's get started with a story. I was a parish priest, and I served in more than one congregation, so I know what it's like to enter into a new space, a new place where you don't really know the people yet, you don't know their customs yet, but I also know that there are high expectations when you come in as the new guy. Right? You're, of course, going to walk on the water that the other person sank in or whatever it is. And what this particular search committee wanted was a spiritual leader. Now looking back, I realize that, those search materials that you get, those are hardly even legal fictions, honestly, all right? But so I took them at their word. They wanted a spiritual leader. And so I buckled down, sat behind my big fancy desk, and I started cranking out programming for spiritual programs that would bring people closer to Jesus. And there was an older, wiser priest on staff chatting with me, and I'm talking about all these great things I'm doing. I'm going to teach people how to get deep spiritually. And he said, that's so sweet. That's so... But you kind of got the cart before the horse. You have to persuade these people that that's something that they'd want to do in the first place. That's the world that we actually live in now, right? Why would you follow Jesus? Why would you get involved in all of those Christian spiritual practices today? Here's what he was getting at. You might be thinking he was telling me, look, you got to get these people to be more spiritual. That's not what he was getting at. He was trying to alert me to something that I didn't really have a clue about at the time. They're already spiritual. Everybody you encounter is. They've not necessarily thought about the deep beliefs that they have, the tacit beliefs they have, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, that function as the lenses through which they see other people, they see themselves, they see the world. Instead, they sort of take all of that for granted and act on it, right? And why would they give that up to do this Jesus thing? I'll give you an example. So I was talking to one of these guys. I was a guy, and he was getting near retirement. And I don't remember how we exactly got to this point in the conversation. But I said, dude, I mean, you can't retire and then spend every day in retirement playing golf. And he seriously said to me, well, that sounds pretty good to me. Take that to heart. Take that to heart. Everybody already has a spirituality. And let me tell you what I think a spirituality is, and it's one of the basic premises of this book. A spirituality is how we work our longings out in the practices and daily habits of our lives. That's what spirituality is. It's the expression of deep-held beliefs about how reality works and how we might align ourselves with that greater reality. I'll say more about that in just a little bit. But I want to put it in a slightly different way. They have begun to shape their whole lives with practices that they assume will take them to their perception of what I've called a full-hearted life, which I believe we all want. So let me tell you what I think that looks like. So bear with me. I am going to read some, but I won't go on and on and on and on. All right. Like I said, we all want to lead a full-hearted life, to have a sense of who we are, that we are being true to ourselves, and that we do what we do in this world matters. To be passionate about a purpose, to have genuine relationship with others, and to take joy in being alive. Our ideal of a full-hearted life emerges from our foundational beliefs, from our worldviews. These beliefs provide for us answers to life's big existential questions. Who am I? What is my purpose? How does my life fit into the larger scheme of things? Does the path I'm on really lead to a full-hearted life? And what is that anyway? To put it very simply, does my life have a point, or is it pointless? Right? Am I the one, as I said in my previous book, am I the one who's ultimately going to have to say, vanity, vanity, all is vanity? This is all a bunch of, well, vanity, right? Okay. All right. So let me read to you another little bit. If any of you have read this, my apologies that it's a repetition. I'm going to read to you a story about a young woman that I taught when I was a philosophy professor. So that in retrospect taught me a ton about the landscape that we inhabit and that we seek to serve as spiritual leaders. And if you're baptized, you're a spiritual leader, by the way. Okay? Or you make some pretty wild and bold promises. You do. All right. Leave the room if you don't like them when there's a baptism or confirmation. All right. So let me just, this is from chapter 1. And honest to Pete, I am not making this up. Okay. I'm really not. I'll tell you when I'm lying later. But if I tell you that I'm lying, can you believe me that I'm, well, never mind. Ellen asked, you're a Christian, right? Sure. Why do you ask? Professor Bob said that Christians are cannibals. At communion, you eat the body and blood of Jesus. Eating human flesh makes you a cannibal. Are you really a cannibal? She was being serious. I was a philosophy professor at a secular university. Ellen was one of a group of students who regularly showed up during my office hours to argue with me, and actually more with each other, about life's big questions. Who am I? Is there really a God? How do you know the difference between good and evil? Does my life have a purpose? These are not idle questions. People ask them, either intentionally or tacitly assume things about them. How we answer them forms the foundation of the full-hearted life we seek. I had taught them, these students, the basic skills of critical thinking and the value of clear-eyed reasoning. I still believe in that. Many of my students knew vaguely that I was a Christian, but we didn't discuss my personal beliefs in class. They rightly assumed that I meant what I said about the importance of rationally examining our own beliefs and values. So Ellen was understandably stunned and disappointed to hear that I indulged in some primitive, superstitious ritual. That's why she made an appointment outside my regularly scheduled office hours to demand an explanation from me. It was actually sort of confrontational. How could somebody so educated and so committed to critical thinking indulge in such a repulsive practice? Eating human flesh, even symbolically, is uncivilized and just gross. It made no sense to her. So let me tell you a little bit about Ellen. Ellen had grown up in an entirely non-religious family. She had never been to a worship service and knew only the most superficial things about Christian beliefs and practices. So she was susceptible to that suggestion by another professor. Her beliefs, the beliefs that led her to question my integrity, had come from non-religious sources. At the time, I had no way of knowing that Ellen was giving me a preview of our current spiritual landscape. Everybody believes something. But religion no longer plays, or at least organized religion, no longer plays a dominant role in shaping those beliefs. Many people have no religious background, and even those sitting in our pews on Sunday have frequently drawn their answers to life's big questions from sources other than religion. Influencers on TikTok, X, and Instagram probably shape the spiritual consciousness of at least as many people as even the most effective preacher. Ouch, that hurts, doesn't it? And it's true. It's true. It's true. So I'm gonna go on. I'm gonna keep going in. So feel free to interrupt. It's not an interruption. Expand the conversation with a question or observation. So what I'm about to say is going to sound like a contradiction to you. I want you to think about it. Ellen was not an unbeliever. Nobody is. There is a great sea of alternative beliefs out there in which we swim. And in fact, what I would say is that Ellen has a non-religious faith. I know that sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? But she does. She has a non-religious faith. I've got in mind here something that William James said. Here's his definition of faith. Were one asked to characterize the life of faith in the broadest and most general terms possible, one might say that it consists of the belief that there is an unseen order and our supreme good lies in harmoniously adjusting ourselves thereto. I mean, you see, right? She was offended by what I said on moral grounds, right? She assumed that I was a hypocrite, which she thought was a sin, although she would never have called it that, right? You get the idea? You get the idea? So look at, let me just step back and tell you what the project is to some extent. What I've tried to argue is that, yeah, there are a whole lot of different beliefs, but I want to zero in on really two basic kinds. One that rejects transcendence and the other that takes transcendence as central to one's existence. Okay, so in other words, the full-hearted life with respect to the one that rejects transcendence. And by the way, you can reject transcendence and say you believe in Jesus till the cows come home. Okay, let me just tell you something. You know, all those. Here's an example. I'm going to roll it, and I'm not busting on anybody much. So look at. So I'm standing at a gas pump, which is where one does evangelism, right? You're standing at a gas pump, and a guy pulls up in an RV. And I'm pumping away my gas, he's pumping away his gas, and he sees this, the collar, right? And you know, I find myself in public a lot, and I see that people are staring at me. I assume that I'm an extraordinarily handsome man until I see that, oh, doggone it, it's the collar again, right? And they're wondering, okay, who is this guy? He's got a collar on, and that is the worst looking shirt I've ever seen in my life, all right? So this guy strikes up a conversation, and I can tell he's really embarrassed. And I'm trying to figure out what he's embarrassed about. It's Sunday afternoon. I got on a collar. I do have a PhD in philosophy. I deduced it. He's feeling embarrassed that he didn't go to church today. And he spent about 5 minutes explaining to me why it was necessary to buy the RV because his daughter is on a dance team that travels, and he has to spend every weekend in Houston or in Dallas because, after all, he has to go to the dance competitions, and he really wishes he could go to church, but what can he do? All right. Now, I'm not really about saying he has to go to church. What I'm saying is, think about what's the assumption about the full-hearted life that this gentleman has for himself and he has for his daughter. What's the message? What's the faith? Well, it's probably that the full-hearted life is attained by things that are what some would call in the imminent realm. Okay, here, career success. right? Material wealth, power, status, celebrity. That's a big one, by the way. Celebrity is really big, super seductive, right? All of those things are rooted in what I'm calling a non-religious faith, or what I've called elsewhere a kind of secular mysticism. I got that from Andy Root. Okay, right? So you've got that one kind of faith and spirituality. You've got the other kind that, and I'm going to put this super simply. Some of you who know me well know that I've been in sobriety for over 20 years. All right. So some of the stuff you hear me say is going to sound awful AA-ish. So that's okay. It's all right. You can learn a thing or two from AA. The transcendent religion, I guess we'll call it that, faith, is this. You look for God to do something for you that you cannot do for yourself. All right? You look for a power beyond yourself to do for you what you need done and that you cannot do for yourself. Am I making sense to you? All right? To put it another way then is in the secular vein, in essence, you'll be tied to an achievement track. You're going to do for yourself what you want. You're going to achieve it. Andy Root even calls it the exercise of the will to power. All right, that seems a little harsh, but what he's getting at is you believe that you will achieve for yourself the full-hearted life. With me? Yeah? Right? On the other hand, you believe that a full-hearted life is a function of being connected to a power beyond you that is greater than you. With me? Making sense? All right. So what a lot of this book is really about is this question. So how's that working for you? Right? That's really what it is. It's really about what I'm asking people to do is to reflect upon their own deep beliefs, right? Look at the spirituality that they inhabit. And generally speaking, you don't get right at your beliefs. You know that because I have a low doctrine of humanity. I'm sorry. If you have a high anthropology, you'll hate me after a while. But look at people lie. All right, so, okay. Right, people lie. And you know who they lie to most? There you go. Look, I knew you loved Jesus, right? All right, look at yeah, we lie to ourselves. We lie to ourselves. And so what we have to do to really you really want to dig on down there to what your beliefs are, watch what you do. Better yet, get somebody else to watch what you do and tell on you. All right? Really, I'm serious. That's why we need spiritual directors. Somebody that's really, really honest to look at you and say, come on, really? Are you serious? Have you been watching yourself lately? All right? Seriously, right? So what this book is about is pretty straightforwardly saying, okay, how does it work out for you on the secular track? How does it work out for you on the transcendent track? And wild guess, which way do I think is, in fact, going to work out best for you? But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I'm not trying to tell anybody even what to believe. I'm asking you here and anybody on Zoom and anybody who reads the book to do the hard work themselves and to step them through it. You know what this is evidence of? I'm going to tell you what this is evidence of. You can take the boy out of philosophy and you can't take the philosophy out of boy, right? That's the truth of the matter, right? Because I'll tell you what philosophy is, right? You know, it's love of wisdom, right? It's love of wisdom. Why am I doing what I do? Why am I doing what I do? Not what am I telling myself about why I do what I do? Why do I do what I do? And how's that working for me? We can choose a why, and we can be tragically wrong about it. Right? And that's what I get at again and again and again in this text. But before going too much further, Philosophy Boy has to do something like this. I've really got to talk to you about how the mind works. Now you may take a nap. All right, you ready? Much of what I have to say does arise out of, and thank you for mentioning it, does arise out of my philosophical work in phenomenology. Phenomenology is the study of human consciousness. Okay. Now, lots of people on the streets, if you ask them, how does the mind work? They would tell you something that made you think, oh, you see the mind as a mirror. It reflects reality. Does that sound familiar to you? Yes. If that's what you think, don't admit it. You'll only embarrass yourself. Okay. Okay. Or is it a blank slate? You know nothing and it'll be written on by experience over time. Those are two famous. One, tabula rasa, is John Locke, right? So mind is a mirror. By golly, that's like tons and tons and tons of people over the centuries. That's not how consciousness works. Consciousness. See if I can put this in a way that makes sense. And actually, neuroscientists have discovered this to be the case for the brain. Consciousness is anticipatory. Okay. Here's what I mean by that. It's not as if we're sitting someplace, a datum shows up, right? Some object of perception shows up, and then we interpret it. All right? It's not like that. We come to every experience with concepts about, we're already expecting certain things, right? We're already expecting. We're bringing concepts to bear. So I'll tell you who tells you this a whole lot better than me. All right. See, when all else fails, read somebody that's more interesting, and then people will give you credit for it, is how I've really functioned. How many of you have read David Foster Wallace's stuff? You know him at all? Yeah, it's great. Isn't he great? Yeah, I bet you know what I'm about to read. Yeah, all right. So he gave a commencement address once. And I love this. Honest to Pete. I love this. So here's a parable that he tells. Here's a parable. And this gets at how consciousness works, and it also gets at what I'm trying to help people do. All right? There are these two young fish swimming along. And they happen to meet an older fish swimming the other way, who nods at them and says, "Morning, boys. How's the water?" And the two young fish swim on a bit, and then eventually one of them looks over at the other and goes, "What the hell is water? What the hell is water? It's what you're looking through and you can't see it." And in case you want somebody more Christian-like, C.S. Lewis says something like this. By the way, this is why I can't be a Baptist. I couldn't quote my own address if my life depended upon it. So it's going to have to be a paraphrase of C.S. Lewis, okay? No offense if any of you are Baptists. God loves you. You'll just be put in a different room from me in the great effort. That was a little bit of an embarrassing "there's Jake" moment. Okay, now I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. What was I going to say? Thank you. CS isn't laughing either. I believe that the sun has risen. You know this quote? Not because I see it, but because by it, I see everything. That's how I believe in Christianity. Get the idea? Get the idea? So one of the basic premises of this book is we all seek a full-hearted life. Everybody's got a spirituality. We're in a sea of spiritualities and the faiths that underlie them. I've suggested that there are two basic faiths and secular and spiritualities. And now what I'm saying to you is the other assumption is this is how consciousness works. And so the work in a secular world, the work of preachers, the work of teachers, is to encourage your listeners to think for God's sake. All right? Not to tell them what to think. I mean, who the heck are you, really? I mean, you've got this work to do too. All right? What are your beliefs, really? And I'm going to admit that I am also influenced by James. Ideas are intimately connected to actions. Okay? You want to know the truth of an idea? Look at it, well, what another pragmatist said, look at its cash value. What does it mean out in the world? So really what I'm doing in a faith, in a full-hearted life, is to offer an existential exploration of Christian belief in the secular world. All right? How's it working out for you? What are the consequences of acting on this belief rather than that belief? You want to hear one? You want to hear one of the comparisons? Oh, say yes. It will make my heart just, oh, I just knew it. All right. Okay. All right. I look at various things like the self and that sort of thing. Let's look, though. Remember what I told you is that the work, the spiritual work, is a matter of aligning yourself, either very intentionally or unintentionally, but what you're really about, whether you mean to do it or not, you're after a full-hearted life. That's your deep longing, or at least your vision of that full-hearted life. And the way you get to the full-hearted life is that you align yourself with what you understand reality to be. Am I making sense to you? Yeah, alignment. Just remember that word, alignment. It's all about alignment, right? Well, think about it now. If you're a thoroughgoing atheist who believes that all that exists is the material world, I want you to think about that. And let's see how that works out for you. By the way, to really get into this, you got to admit something really ghastly. You're going to die. Right? I don't know if you've noticed this yet. The death rate, at least in the United States, did you know that the death rate has remained 100%? It is amazing. Although I have heard that the new administration will turn that around. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. Or I should do more of it. Maybe. Yeah, I should do more of it. Look at. Okay. Look, think about. Okay. For just a minute. Let's imagine that you're a thoroughgoing materialist. Like it almost. In fact, I'm sure it's not going to happen here, but in all kinds of talks I give in different places, somebody is inevitably going to do this. They're going to stand up and say, well, I believe in science. You've heard this. Surely you've heard this. Well, I believe in science too. I mean, my Apple Watch is great. I mean, right? And when I step on the plane, I know it's going to fly, and that's science. Right. My daughter had an open heart surgery, and I'm really grateful for medical science. Right. I'm grateful for all that. I don't doubt that science is massively helpful. Right. But the question is, if all that is matter, and you admit your mortality, how's that going to work out for you? Imagine being a thoroughgoing atheist on Ash Wednesday. All right. Remember that you are dust, and
to dust you shall return.
Now, I'm telling you, that's a buzzkill if you think that's it, right? Isn't it? I mean, it is a buzzkill. I mean, you're walking up to babies and you're saying, you're croaking. All right, you're croaking, you little stinker. All right. You cried all the way through my sermon. You got it coming. All right. I mean, really. Okay. So what does that mean for the meaning of human existence? What does that mean for the meaning of human existence? How do you find meaning in life if you're a materialist? And, I don't mean by that you want nice clothes. I mean by that all that exists is what meets the eye, as it were, measurable in some way or another. So again, you remember how I said it's always best to quote smart people when you can't get yourself out of the corner you've painted yourself into? There is a famous philosopher named Thomas Nagel. He's a contemporary philosopher. And actually, if I recall correctly, this is from a relatively introductory text in which he talks about the existential consequences of materialism. Are you ready? Even if you produce a great work of literature which continues to be read thousands of years from now, eventually the solar system will cool, or the universe will wind down and collapse, and all trace of your effort will vanish. All right? The problem is that although there are justifications for most things, big and small, that we do within life, none of these explanations explain the point of your life as a whole. It wouldn't matter if you had never existed. And after you've gone out of existence, it won't matter that you did. Now, look at, is that a slam dunk for a person that's a materialist to not be a materialist anymore? No, it isn't. Let me see. It's Hitchens, I believe it is, who says, as he was dying of stage 4 esophageal cancer, he wrote, "It's no fun to appreciate to the full the truth of the materialist proposition that I don't have a body, I am a body." He stuck with it right to the end. All right. My point is not that I have found a rational gem that will force anyone to capitulate in the face of transcendence. All right. There will be plenty of people who will say something like, a commentator in the New York Times. Okay, this guy's KCK. And he said any number of fairly harsh things about when you die, you die. But then he goes on, this is what he prescribes. So celebrate life in every moment, admire its wonders, love what without reservation, and accept its inevitable end. Okay? Seems reasonable. Does that seem reasonable? Seems reasonable, right? Be brave. That's the usual line. Well, here's my response. KCK's prescription for a meaningful life is to celebrate, admire, and love. It's sound advice. I celebrate, I admire, I love, right? I do. I like it. It's good. It's better than a stick in the eye. But the materialist view of the world does not justify it. After all, there is nothing inherently worth celebrating, admiring, or loving in a thoroughly material world. There's not. You can weigh and measure material things to your heart's content, but you will not squeeze out an ounce of value or carry away an inch of meaning from them. For a materialist, value and meaning boil down to how each individual happens to perceive or to feel about things. To be consistent, KCK can report that he celebrates, admires, and loves various things, and that this makes him feel better about his inevitable descent into the world's compost heap. Additionally, he can point out that many people agree with him, and they do. But this agreement among people is a coincidence, not a shared response based on a reality that transcends them all. He has no basis in what he takes to be reality for urging anybody else to do the same thing. To put it simply, if his view of reality is true, he doesn't really find or uncover meaning. That's crucial. He doesn't find it or uncover it. It's not out there, right? It's a quantifiable world, not a qualitative world. He makes it up, right? He makes it up. Meaning for a consistent materialist is a function that dies with its author. By contrast, if we perceive this universe as created by God, we're able to discover meaning in a source beyond ourselves, a meaning that we share with a community over time. So I'll tell you one more story, and then let's just open up for questions. And this chapter actually begins with this story, and I was a little hesitant to bring it up. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway, because I lack self-control and common sense. So how many of you have done CPE? Let me see. Yeah. Okay, so you know how green you were, all that. God, I was green. So I was at a hospital that had something like 1,200 births a month, which meant a lot of trauma in the maternity ward, right? First baptism there, first burial there, all that happened there. And in this hospital, there was just one overnight chaplain. And, they'd kid about you being Dr. Death when you showed up, and really hilarious. So I don't know, 2, 3 in the morning, I get a call back then there were beepers, okay? There were beepers. Some of you that's a thing you put on your back, okay? All right. So you get beeped and you go, and I went down there. Well, you go, right? You go, you got to call, you got to go. I went to the maternity ward, and a nurse looked up at me and said, "What are you doing here?" The beeper, right? And I said, I was told by somebody that a young couple wanted to see a chaplain because She was having a distressed pregnancy. She got up to go to the bathroom, and the child, or however you say it, I mean, I don't want to have that argument about fetus or child or whatever, but she literally gave birth in the toilet. It was horrible. It was horrible. They were really distraught. My only role, you show up, you look alert, and you meet people where they are. They were Hindus, by the way. Okay? Didn't matter. All right? They were in trouble emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. I was going to show up and just sort of be there. Right? This nurse said to me, well, it's just a mass of tissue. You don't really need to be here. Right? And I knew that what she wanted to do is have an argument about abortion. And, that's a worthy argument to have someplace else. Right? And so I said to her, look, I get it that this is your point of view, but there's a policy and a procedure here. And I noticed there were two other nurses kind of doing this right behind her, right? And I saw that she wasn't normal staff. She was, like one of those agency nurses. So she didn't know all the policies and the procedures. And what we called the nurse who was over all the nurses, we, behind her back, called her Nurse Ratched. Do you remember? Okay. So I said, I didn't say Nurse Ratched, but I knew what would happen when we called her. I said, perhaps we should call the supervisor. And she zoomed down, set us all straight, and I went in and did whatever. And I was with these folks for hours. It was really agonizing. You know what? In their words, not mine, this is their wish. And I was there to serve them. They said, we want to see our daughter. They've taken her away to the morgue. So I went to the morgue, right? And wrapped her in the things that you're supposed to wrap them in, brought them back, let them hold her, all the stuff that they wanted, okay? This is their wish. They're looking for healing. I'm going to be there to do that. It's not my place to judge them, think about what they think. It doesn't matter. They're hurting, right? So I did that. So I went back to the office. I'm all by myself, and I'm thinking through this thing. And I have to tell you, that phrase about tissue, right? And I'll tell you what I did. I had just gotten my own mother out of the morgue. I had just seen my mother's body, right? And I thought, and that was horrible. Joy was there with me. I don't know if you had ever seen me cry quite like that. I mean, it was that body heaving. You know what I mean? Kind of thing. An ugly cry. Just. And so it got me thinking. So what if that's all that any of us is? What if, all right, could I live with that? There's the question. All right. I can't answer that for any of you. I can't answer it for Hitchens. Obviously, he answered it differently. KCK, I don't know what happened with him, and I don't know if he's still alive. Doesn't really matter in this particular context, right? The point is, these are the things we need to confront, right? Maybe I shouldn't say confront, address. Invite people to reflect upon. How's that working for you? Can you really, really lead the life you're yearning to have? Are your deepest longings going to be met with that series of beliefs and the practices that arise from them? Our beliefs, and I'll end with this and open up for questions. Our beliefs lead us to go up to babies and put ashes on their forehead, remind them and their parents that they're mortal in order to open us up to the power of the resurrection of Jesus Christ, right? You really, really know you need somebody to get you out of the grave. I haven't met anybody yet that pulled themselves up by their bootstraps out of the grave, right? And maybe that doesn't matter to somebody. Get it? Matters to me. Matters to me. And having those kinds of conversations are part of how we navigate our way through what I'm calling a secular age, right? By the way, I don't mean by this that people hate God or they're against God or against Christians. They were at war on Christmas or some ridiculousness like that. What I mean is there are many, 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 many different belief systems, and even ones that claim to be Christian, and that sounds ugly the way I put it, but go with me, aren't necessarily functionally Christian. They don't really put the transcendent at the center. They don't admit as Paul so powerfully did. Well, I shouldn't use the word powerfully. Powerlessness. I have admitted my powerlessness, at least for today. At least for today. All right? And that's different from a life guided by the will to power. That unpacks itself in a number of different ways in the book. But like I said, I want to get you out at a reasonable time. And I think, golly, I've really stretched your patience at this point. So thank you for listening. And let's open up. Okay to open up for any questions or go get goodies. I mean, we can do that too. But are any thoughts, questions, insights? Yes.
So I'm curious about, you brought it up right at the end.
Yeah.
And it might be more out of the purview of your interest. But what in the book or in your own thinking about this, how do you make sense of what do you do with the segment of the population that is professed to be Christians? And I'm even thinking of, like, you mentioned TikTok earlier as well, like young Christians on social media that maybe approach it in a way that is commodified or a checklist or like hustling for faith sort of situation. I want to hear your thoughts on
Gosh, that's a great question. And in fact, I think that's going to impact those who have ordained ministry as their primary ministry, perhaps more than anything else, right? I have to say, I said this at St. Andrews earlier today, and I'll say it. A friend of mine, Mac McCarter, who instituted a community organization process called Community Renewal International. I mean, he's a saint among us, right? He's taught me a whole lot about how to deal with, well, humans, right? Here's one of my basic rules for myself. I've had my last argument. I've had my last argument. I'm willing to have a conversation with anybody about anything, but I'm not willing to argue. I would love to hear what you have to say. I want to help you unpack that. I mean, look, and yes, I was a philosophy professor, and that's what we did, right? I mean, it's that whole, well, tell me why you think that's true kind of thing. And what are the consequences of that? How has that been working in your life? That's what I would do. I would also preach pretty straightforwardly, not saying to people, in fact, I do, not saying to people, oh, you're bad if you don't go to church on Sunday. For that matter, I think you need to ask the question, why does anybody go to church on Sunday? Why would anybody do such a thing, right? And that's a reasonable question. There are no unreasonable questions. There are no ridiculous conversations. The only kinds of things I'm not really willing to participate in are those kinds of arguments where somebody's trying to put you down. Or make you believe something, or tell you because what you believe you're bad, evil, going to hell, or whatever that is. So naive as it may sound, honestly, I think our best shot is to be good listeners. In fact, I think evangelism generally, which by the way probably does need to start in the pews, right? My next diocesan convention is called Knowing Jesus because I think we have that problem, right? That challenge. I really believe building relationship, showing that you trust another person's humanity and that you're interested and care, there you go, right? There aren't that many people in here who would remember Don Armentrout. Becky, I know you do. Don, he probably said it to every class, but I remember he said it to ours. He taught church history. I don't know if you know who he was. And he kind of talked like this. Isn't that right? Talk like this. He'd pull his pants up like this. Right? You know what I mean? That was Don. That was Don all over. He said, you know what? People are they go come to church, they're going to come look for Jesus. And all they're going to get is you. That's what he'd say. All right. And I think, I've taken that to heart. And I think I'll bet, at least my imagination tells me, Jesus was a whale of a teacher. But my guess is that people followed Jesus because they could tell in a heartbeat, this guy really cares about me. He really cares about me. He's come to be right where I am, and he didn't have to. Right? Does that make sense? Okay, yeah. I will say that the sort of the postlude of the book has a story about this. So if you get it, right? Yeah. Anything else? Oh, sorry. Oh, my bad. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering, so kind of like inspiration for the book first, and then like second, how like what would you say to some young college students and having advice on having these kind of big question conversations?
Really great. That's a great question. I will. Inspiration for the book, and then how would I carry on a conversation with college students? Right, like, or any young people.
Yeah, initiate those.
Okay. Oh, initiate those conversations. Okay. Really, it's my pastoral experience over a long period of time.
Yeah.
That culminated in this book. That and being a philosophy nerd. I mean, that's inescapable. But I see again and again and again. I engage people's lives. Right. I'm not using some like litmus test to figure out if they have the right beliefs, truthfully. Right. I'm engaging their lives and seeing how it's going for them. And then we're willing to explore about how that goes. And I've just, to use a metaphor, I've been around way too many car crashes. There really are a whole lot of people who still will call up a priest when life has flown apart at the seams. And I've been in those situations. And it's brought me to use the meager gifts that I've got, which are writing, thinking, studying, that kind of thing, to try to bring out some way forward for people who are looking for a more empowering, enriching, joy-filled, stable. We're not stable. Nothing's really very stable. That they live a spiritual life that delivers the promises that they think they're getting. Okay. I think a lot of spiritual lives, a lot of spirituality makes profound promises and will not deliver. Right. And I am heartsick about that. I don't think that, I don't walk around worrying about people going to hell. By the way, I've been there. Just a nice place to visit, but you don't want to stay. I mean, it's not even a nice place to visit. All right. So there's that. And I tell you, there's no one magic formula for initiating conversations, except maybe this one. Knowing what a friend actually is. A friend is a person, and being a friend is the key. And, I really take seriously that Jesus is our friend. I take that really, really seriously. And I understand that as outlined in Proverbs, which I talk about in the book. But you know what a friend does? A friend sticks closer to you than even your kin do. A friend really understands you on the inside. A friend is never going to say the thing that will hurt you just to hurt you, ever, ever, ever. However, the friend is the one who will tell you what nobody else will tell you, that you don't want to hear, but they desperately, they're really, you need it. You need it. Be a friend. And your friendship starts by listening. I'm totally convinced of that hearing another person, right? Do people still say, I feel seen? Do people, is that like in the 90s or something? I mean, no, they don't, do they? Oh, look, there's an old goat trying to be a cool guy. I know, right? I know. Next thing you know, you'll go get a tattoo, right? I know, isn't that terrible? But look at when a person, don't you know what it's like for somebody to really hear you, right? And doesn't that make a difference, right? It does in my life. And I think that's how to do it. Don't worry nearly so much. And here's the other thing. Don't worry about changing their mind. Help them think it through. Richard Rohr says this, and I really love this. I don't love everything about Richard Rohr, but I sure like this. Nobody can do your spiritual homework for you, right? You can show up and encourage them to do their spiritual homework and stick by them while they do. Be their conversation mate. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And patience is a big deal. It's hard, isn't it? Yeah, I know. Yeah. It is. Thank you. Those are great questions. Are we ready for snacks? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yes.
I was trying to figure out where Jesus is in this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Because when he has conversations with people, I don't remember that he's trying to listen to them.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
He's making them think, what do you think? What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
He's asking. But he's talking to religious people almost all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Who have faith in God some way.
Yeah.
In the church setting. Paul goes to Mars Hill.
Yeah.
To your people, the philosophers.
Yes.
And he says, let's think this thing through. I can't quote scripture to you because you don't.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But he's still talking to people who believe in something transcendent. He says, I see all the gods.
Yes.
But our culture is different from any culture previous.
Yes.
Because we don't believe in any kind of God, because as you started off with, it's materialism.
Yeah.
And that's coming from a belief system that we are here by chance, that God had nothing to do. The central core issue for us today, it seems, is trying to engage people as to whether the other belief system that is predominant, which is that we're here by chance, that we simply evolved, that we don't have a soul, there's no afterlife, nothing's purposeful, etc. We can't quote scripture because scripture is saying God created everything. And so if somebody believes that God did not create everything, you can't quote scripture. You can't even quote Jesus because he's part of the book that people no longer believe in.
Yeah, you have to believe in God for the book to make any sense. Right. Yeah.
Well, you have to believe in the book that tells you about God.
Yeah. Right. Precisely.
So it seems to me the question we've got to deal with, particularly young people who are losing faith. What is there that we can talk to them about, which is the core of their belief system? And isn't it origins? Isn't that the key to the whole thing? That if we can't get origins sorted out without saying, well, God did it, but he used Darwin as a subcontractor. You know, that's where most of the big dogs in theology are today. To say evolutionary creation, that God did it, but he did it through Darwin. But that doesn't work, and that messes up the whole book of religious inspiration to begin with. That's not what we do.
Well, it sounds to me as if you've got a really great take on how to enter into several different conversations, especially the conversation about origin. What I would say is it's possible that, at least my take is, instead of saying that they don't believe in God, as a matter of fact, they do, but not a transcendent one. They will have, dear old Tillich, an ultimate concern. Yeah, and they're going to be worshiping, as dear old Dylan said, you're going to serve somebody, right? You're going to serve somebody. By the way, if you haven't seen that movie, oh, it's a great movie, A Complete Unknown. Here's the thing. If you can help people understand that they've got an ultimate concern, which is their God, whether they want to call it that or not, doesn't matter. They've got an ultimate concern. And the question really then is, so is your God delivering on the promises that your God makes? Right? How's that working out for you? That's my question. Okay. My question is an existential question. My question, instead of tracing it back to first principles, my question really leads people to look at consequences and results. All right. Where will this lead your life? All right. How will this shake out for you? On your deathbed, are you going to be calling up Fidelity to see how your investments are doing? All right. Is that what's going to happen for you? And so I think you've got a really great track to take. Of course, obviously, I've taken a slightly different track. And we can perhaps over cookies discuss if Jesus is in that or not. And if not, straighten me out. Right? So, Dean?
I think on that note, thank you to the bishop. There's the opportunity for more conversation in the Holt multipurpose room, which is on the lower floor down that way.
And also the chance to perhaps get a copy of A Full-Hearted Life from the bookstore or some other volumes that the bishop has already written.
Gosh,
You
that's
might even
nice.
sign it.
I would. You won't be able to read my handwriting, but yes, I would. Yes. Thank you all for being here. What a lovely thing. Thank you. Thank you. Really appreciate you. And the Zoom crowd, thank you for being here.